So I think everybody knows at this point that a Final Fantasy IX Remake is in the works at Square Enix. With the recent Nvidia leaks that happened years ago that listed a bunch of games that would release in the next couple of years. Final Fantasy IX was one such game that was on that list, and one game that many were still very skeptical about on whether it was even real or not. Of course, with reliable source Midori, we have a bunch of news on the remake and where it is in development. Things like its gameplay direction, going multi-platform, or seeing a potential release date very soon. Midori also gives some insight as to why the remake has taken so long to come out, even longer than it should have. So if you enjoy content like this, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe for anything JRPG. As many may know by now, Square Enix went through a major company restructure. It led many people to believe that a lot of the projects they were working on were either cancelled or left on the back burner. However, Midori confirms that is not the case. She says here, the Final Fantasy IX Remake is still in development. It is a title that was not cancelled in the restructure of Square Enix during its fiscal year. According to conversations, the title was originally outsourced to another developer. But Square Enix was not satisfied and development shifted. Now, I know what you guys are thinking, and yeah, Final Fantasy IX Remake isn't the first to be outsourced by Square Enix, as that first happened with Final Fantasy VII Remake. I know many of you guys may remember that one trailer that looked significantly different from anything we would see from the remake going forward. That trailer and the game at the time was being made by a developer named CyberConnect 2, which are also famously known for their anime adaptation games such as Naruto Ninja Storm. However, it would seem that Square Enix was also not satisfied with the development of 7 Remake in the hands of CyberConnect 2. If memory serves, they were fired and development of 7 Remake went back in-house at Square Enix. It really makes you wonder as to why Square Enix chooses to outsource some of their most important games. These aren't just some random games. These are Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy IX. And while outsourcing your projects shouldn't lead to a bad product, I mean, these are some of the most influential games within Final Fantasy. So the fact that Square Enix has let this happen twice is kind of baffling to me. It's the reason why Final Fantasy IX has taken as long as it has, is because they choose to outsource their projects instead of working on it internally. Again, outsourcing remake projects shouldn't be a bad thing. In fact, a lot of remakes turn out just fine. It just seems that in Square Enix's case, it doesn't seem to be working out at all. Not with the 7 remake and not with Final Fantasy IX. Midori then goes on to talk about multi-platform for not only Square Enix's future titles, but also, of course, Final Fantasy IX. She says here, there are plans for new information on some Square Enix titles at the Xbox showcase. I don't know if this title will be at the showcase, so it is good to keep expectations low right now. And this is a title that is currently planned for release on multiple platforms. She adds on, it is information I think I did not remember to post. During a period of time, I think this title was in development for current Switch hardware. I'm not certain if it is still in development for Switch or if this title will still be released on Switch. I could not verify. So unlike the other Final Fantasies that have released throughout the handful of years, this game will not follow that same pattern. This is an entry that could release on PC, Xbox, and even the Switch 2 at launch. Midori does add on that the Switch version is not set in stone. But honestly, I'd be very surprised if the 9 Remake does not in fact make it to the Switch 2. I think it would make the perfect launch title for that console. But to be able to play a Final Fantasy game at launch on your preferred platform is something I think everybody has wanted for a very long time. Now, Midori does go on to say something that I think a lot of the traditional Final Fantasy fans will love to hear. A user asks, do you know if it will be action-based or turn-based? And Midori just simply responds with, the gameplay is turn-based. Now, I know people are constantly debating on whether Final Fantasy should be an action game or stick to its more traditional roots in its turn-based gameplay. Now, for me personally, I've never really had a preference on whether it should be one or the other. I love both. For each developer to have their take on what Final Fantasy means to them is something that I think is very interesting. For me, this franchise means more than just one aspect of a game. It represents different forms of storytelling and different styles of gameplay that really make it seem that you were experiencing something unique from that developer at that time. And because of that, I believe it makes this franchise that much more special for it. Not every game has to be a Final Fantasy VII or a Final Fantasy 15 or 16, but I think it's because of that diversity in every aspect that really makes the developers behind the game shine that much more. Midori also gives some insight as to when we might be able to see Final Fantasy IX Remake. She says here, development of this title is now very far along, but I do not have any firm information on the scope of this title or a firm release date period right now. This title could release before the end of this fiscal year, but I am not certain right now. When asked by James how long we might have to wait, if it would be 7 years, Midori does respond and say it is a title I think will be released by next year. So you gotta think, Final Fantasy IX Remake has been in development for almost probably 4 or 5 years now, with the scope being significantly smaller than something you would see in something like 7 Remake. With all of the news we have so far, this game is looking like it'll be a lot more one-for-one than something like 7. Now, I'm just gonna be straight up, if you guys do not show out for this game being a more traditional style of Final Fantasy, then there might be some problems. Not for me, but I know this is going to be an eye-opener for Square Enix for the future of Final Fantasy. So if this game ends up selling a lot less than the action-style games of Final Fantasy, then, well, Square Enix has their answer. But given that this is a remake of a beloved Final Fantasy game, I'm sure word will get out and this game will sell just fine. And speaking of the scope of Final Fantasy IX, Midori does confirm that it is a one-part title. Again, it is not on the level of something like the 7R project. And for me, that is completely fine. And while I do love the 7 Remake trilogy, I do think it sucks that we have to wait year after year just for another part to release. But again, for me, I don't need a 9 remake that is on the scope of something like 7. Just give me updated visuals, a faster ATB system, and maybe some new mechanics here and there, and I'm completely happy. I think we can all relax knowing that Final Fantasy IX Remake is real. Not only that, but I think we could all rejoice in the fact that this game is going to be a multi-platform game. Not only multi-platform, but it's also going to be the first Final Fantasy in a while to feature traditional turn-based combat. So if you're one of those traditionalists who really just wanted to see a return to turn-based combat in Final Fantasy, well, there you go. So tell me how you feel about this news. Do you think Final Fantasy IX is right around the corner? Are you excited at the fact that it's going to be turn-based and a return to multi-platform? I think at this point, Square Enix should finally release an official announcement.